Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by Adequest, your cybersecurity and compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're doing a couple things a little bit differently. I'm using Teams to do both the audio and video, so this would be a first. I usually use a separate software, and I'm also using the Teams artificial background. So no, I am still in my kitchen where I usually broadcast from, but today I've got this really cool office behind me here. Even more cool, we have Michel Tricot joining us. Michel has a lot of experience. I mean, I'm looking at your bio here, Michel. It says that you have over 15 years of experience in data engineering. You also worked as the head of integration engineering at Liveramp. But 15 years, I mean, you look like you're still in your 20s. So you started in middle school, or?
That's a good question. I get that a lot. I have to be with my kids sometime so that I don't get carded. I look very young, that is true. But no, I started like everybody else after college.
Okay. And where are you based now?
So I'm normally based in San Francisco, but with COVID and everything, we are spending a few months in the Palm Springs area. I have two kids. I don't think they liked being stuck at home for so long. And
you know what, Palm Springs is excellent. I was there twice in the last 4 months, doing road trips between here and Arizona, and I would stop over in Palm Springs. Beautiful weather in the wintertime, and I do a lot of cycling, and there's some cycling around and so on. So no, it's a great place. So let me just jump back into your background here. After working with Liveramp, then in 2020, you co-founded Airbyte, which is a new open source ELT standard for replicating data from applications, APIs, and databases. Well, congratulations on being a co-founder in a startup.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what Airbyte does in language that we can understand?
Of course. So if you're thinking of today, like the data landscape has changed a lot with how fast and accessible data warehouses and data lake have become. And what has happened because of that is now you have new roles that can actually be very data savvy. The problem is right now, these roles still depend on data engineering and engineering team to be autonomous. And what we are solving with Airbyte is basically how can we help data engineering so that they are not a bottleneck and they are not under constant requests from these new roles like data analyst, data scientist, analytics engineer, and we give them the tools to enable these new roles so that once Airbyte is up and running into your data infrastructure, you have this new role that can go connect to Airbyte and start creating their data pipeline from any places where they have data, whether it's a SaaS service that they're using, whether it's an internal API that they want to pull data from, and just making that seamless and give a lot of autonomy to get the best insight to these roles.
So I'm going to back up a little bit before I talk a little bit more about Airbyte, but I understand that there's a kind of a paradigm shift or a process shift from ETL to ELT. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the specifics of what Airbyte does? Yeah.
So when you're thinking about ETL, or so extract, transform, and load, or ELT, extract, load, and transform, transform is synonymous for business logic. So it means this is when you apply your business logic on the data. The problem is when transformation happens between the extract and the load, you are injecting bias on the data. So it means that after making the data available, this data is biased because you had a use case in mind. So it means that it is limited to very few use cases. Whereas, and if you want to enable these new roles, they might have other things they want to compute. They might have other insights than the one that were planned for. So instead, when you're shifting to ELT, then suddenly what you're doing is you're giving access to all of the data You might have additional tools on top of that for cataloging to understand what the data is, but you have the whole data. So it means that now whoever is coming on a project wants to look at the data can decide what matters to them and how they want to leverage it. And it also allows to create connector that can be reused across many places in the organization, whereas before, each connector was specific to a use case. And now you can start having more general purpose connectors. And that's why like open source at that point makes a lot of sense.
Okay, that sounds pretty clear to me. Let's talk now back to Airbyte. And again, this show is secure talk. So most of what we talk about is in the context of security. So whenever possible, try to weave that into the conversation. But for now, I know that you can pull data from many different sources. Can you give some examples? Yes, just give some examples.
Yep. So I would say one of the most popular one is going to be your internal database or your internal databases, whether it's a Postgre database, MySQL, Oracle. And people, what they want is they want to give access to application data into their analytics workflow, which generally lives in warehouses or data lakes. So that's one use case that is very popular. The other one is customer, like for customer type of analysis, where you might have data on Zendesk, you might have data on Salesforce, you might have data on Google Analytics, and you want to, create some multiple attribution model. And for that, you need to have information about your user, how do they interact with your product, how do they interact with your website. The thing is, this data is spread across all of these different silos, and that's when Airbyte come into play. It just breaks down this silo and centralize that into your warehouse.
Excellent. And then, you kind of, I guess, already mentioned it, but can you give some concrete examples of various destinations that you're already, plugging into?
Yeah. So for destination, a lot of the focus has been on the main data warehouses. So BigQuery, Snowflake, Redshift. We do also Postgres and Data Lake. We are working on the Delta Lake integration at the moment. And we have one initial integration, like destination, that is not really in that realm, which is more like a search engine. It's also an open source project. We needed it for ourselves internally to replicate data and make it searchable. So we have a connector to push each of these records automatically to that search engine, and now we can search it. So, and it's open source, so anyone can add the destination and the source that they need. Excellent.
So maybe, you kind of already gave the contrast between ETL and ELT. Let me back up. We're going to jump to security in a second, but let me back up. What problem or what unique approach is Airbyte bringing to the table that another organization isn't? Because if you're going to go out and get funding, you must have had a really good story. So yeah, what's that story?
So, when we started on Airbyte, what we've done is we've interviewed existing customers of existing solution. And every single one of them, so we interviewed like 50 companies at that time. And every single one of these companies had a parallel system in addition to the ones they were paying for. So once we realized that, we just dig more into like, why is that solution not enough? Right. And there are a few reasons. First one is these solutions don't have the connectors that they need. You can, as a single company, you can only handle a limited number of connectors because there is a very high cost in the maintenance of these connectors. So in general, what you will see is like between 50 and 150 connectors, and that's basically all. So what happened when you don't have the connectors? Well, you build it internally. Now you also had problem with like how the connector was behaving. So sometimes it was not pulling all of the data. There were some missing models or missing records. And at that point, what they would do is just recreate their own connectors on the site to get access to that data. So starting a connector from scratch. Third one was around some type of data sources were too sensitive to be sent to a third-party infrastructure. Right. So if you want to connect your financial database or your user database that is used by your application, this is generally a no-go for a lot of companies, because suddenly you're extracting and exfiltrating data to someone else, and you have to trust them. And with CCPA and GDPR, like all these constraint that is put on data, now companies are becoming very, very self-conscious that they have a huge responsibility toward their customers and internal data. And the last one was also pricing, which when you're buying one of these tools, what you want to do is to save on engineering. And because most of these tools charge on the volume, there is a moment when you are limited by how much you can use the product, because the cost you won't be able to justify this cost. And so when that happens, you're just going to spin up a team or have a few engineers to work internally on building these connectors. And like volume-based pricing is usually very counterproductive when you're dealing with data, because you generally need 100% of the data to make your analysis, but doubling the amount of data is not going to double the insights that you get, the quality. And so the value doesn't grow at the same rate as the volume. So that's when we come in play, where we want to solve like these 4 different problems.
That's excellent, and I'm glad you actually brought up the point of sensitive data and some of those regulatory bodies like GDPR, et cetera. So how does Airbyte help organizations to be more secure and be in compliance with some of these regulatory bodies? Because security and compliance are very much related, but not completely the same.
So Airbyte is an open source solution. So first of all, it means that you can install it on your VPC, or you can install it on your infrastructure. So it means that now you have the control of where your data is going and who has access to it. So that is the first step around security, is like your data is going to be as secure as your internal data. In terms of the compliance, so this is still something that we need to really figure out to see exactly what kind of feature we need to build around compliance. But the first thing is, now, because we have access to all these data sources, we know where a user record is stored. We know that this user record is stored on Zendesk, on Salesforce, et cetera, et cetera. So we have these insights, and this is something we want to build within Airbyte to know, if you want to remove that particular record, or if you need to pull that particular record, Airbyte will be able to help you, because we are connected to all your data sources. And security-wise, I mean, we're going to add more feature, more enterprise feature around security and auditing, like who has access to, like, who is creating these pipelines, who has access to the credentials, et cetera, to ensure that you don't have like a rogue or like a malicious employee that might want to have access to data that they should not have access to.
Okay, no, those are 3 really good points. And yeah, I mean, some of the requirements for GDPR, for example, of full disclosure. I approach you and I say, I want to know what information you have about me, and you have to be able to go and actually provide a report to me and say, here's what we have, and here's our rationalization for having that. Now that's the business, that's not your tool, but the tool needs to be able to provide that. And then things like right to be forgotten. I say, you know what, you don't have a business case or just legal case to retain my data. I want it to be deleted across everything. And if you have to go to multiple different databases and do that, I mean, think about the logistical hassles that would be. Let's jump for a second over to, I mean, how was it, going out and co-founding a company and going for funding? What was that process like?
Yeah, so with John, my co-founder, we started with YC early 2020. They called us the COVID batch, because we were there in person and we finished remote. And we started initially on a project that was a little bit different but adjacent, but very geared toward marketing data. And what we realized with COVID, when companies started to pull back on their marketing budgets and some of their internal budgets, we realized that the product that we were building had some value, but it was not enough to be a need to have. And that's when we refocused toward more like deep into like the data stack and talking to data engineers more than like the line of business at that point.
Right.
And I would say like for the fundraising, what happened is we started to just build a product. We have a team of great engineers that I've worked with in the past. We released it end of September, and within just a few weeks, we got a huge adoption, although it was just a prototype. And at that point, we're like, okay, these are our numbers. This is how we are growing. This is our plan. And we're obviously not making revenue at the moment. I mean, we have a few contracts, but they are more like one-off type of contracts. But we're open source. We're building the community edition. We want to just enable these engineers to have this type of software in their infrastructure. And we went to VCs and we showed them like these are all the companies that have been using the prototype. These are all the requests that we've been getting from them. There is a huge traction from the market today about it. And none of the existing solutions are helping them to do what they want. So I think at that point, what we did is we talked to VCs who really understood the market we're in,
right,
and had a good insight about it. And yeah, after that, it was just showing the numbers that we had and showing our progression, the velocity that we had on adding new connectors, bringing new users, and yeah, that's how we went for our fundraising. And
well, no, that's great. And you're in a really, I guess, I mean, you're in a fortunate position. I mean, no startup it has an easy road to go, but you're fortunate that you could actually show the traction. You know, hey, we've got a viable product out there. It's being used, and we're getting that feedback, and we can start to develop based upon the feedback and move forward. So, I mean, it's kind of, and from a potential investor's point of view, I would think that that's much more attractive than just a conceptual sale. Oh, here's the market and here's our solution. Give us a bunch of money and we'll go build it. You've already built it. Well, the initial stages. Let me ask you this. So how many people in your organization now in Airbyte?
So we are a team of 7. We have 3 more engineers that are going to start over the next months. So 10 people working full time on Airbyte, and we're also working with contractors like to help us on the UI, to help us also on the connectors.
That's great. I don't know if you can see this company here. I worked with them when they were about 15, and it took years and years to grow, and they got up to about 50, and they were just there. They changed their direction and moved from online translation platform into an AI training tool, because you have all these an open source platform with remote, tens of thousands of workers around the world, gig workers, and then they started to do AI training for these AI platforms, and they were able to repackage and sell the company for hundreds of millions of dollars. I had long ago exited, so I have no upside in that. But but I'm saying I saw it happen.
Yeah. No, and if we really look at how many full-time people are working on, at the end of April will be around 20 between contractors that are working full-time with us and the core team.
Yeah, everybody outsources some development and so on. Let me ask you this. So as a co-founder, what's your actual title?
I'm the CEO of
Airbyte. CEO. Okay. As a CEO, you've got to worry about product, right? You've got to worry about growth and revenues. At some point, those VCs are going to come knocking and say, hey, we want, what are we going to do? So you got product and you got development, but you also have, remember, this is Secure Talk, security, because if you were to have a security issue, especially when you're talking about data, that would damage your reputation in the market, right? But oftentimes with startups, the focus is so much more on growth or product, and things like security and security audits, pen testing, things like this. It's just kind of like, that's an expense. It's not really going to add to the bottom line. How do you, as a CEO, balance those three areas and make sure that you don't overlook one for the other?
Yeah. So here I would say that this is one of the advantage of the approach that we've taken. So obviously the approach we've taken has some downside, but being open source, right now we're not focusing on a hosted solution. So we don't own infrastructure. Right. What we do is our users are using Airbyte in their infrastructure. So at that point, Airbyte is as secure, and it's not something that anyone can query. It's an internal tool that people install on their infrastructure. So at that point, Airbyte becomes as secure as the environment in which they run. So if there is, we've delayed the concern for operational security by having Airbyte to run on-prem and on VPCs. And the day Airbyte runs as a hosted solution, if we happen to do it one day, then security will be priority number one. Because, I've come from I was at Liveramp before starting Airbyte, and Liveramp manages hundreds, terabytes and terabytes of customer data, and security is paramount there. And so we have encoded some of these good practices that we've learned. Like a lot of the people from the team come also from Liveramp, so they have this experience. And how do you balance ease of engineering as well along with security, and how do you encode these good practices into your code? What do you not expose? And so today we build Airbyte in a secure way, but we don't operate it, so we don't have this concern yet.
Right. Okay, so you've kind of almost outsorted or sidestepped that potential issue there. Being part of the COVID batch, how is that like building a company? I mean, are there people that you've hired obviously you're not working in an office, has that been challenging for you, or is it, this is just the world we live in and let's do it remote and let's go?
That's exactly how it happened. I think now it's part of our DNA to work well remotely, because we've been incepted as a remote, during COVID. So we had no choice but to adapt. And, as a startup, you have to adapt, otherwise you're not going to succeed. And so we have internal ways of working, making sure that communication is as asynchronous as possible. We have almost like our own SLA on how quickly we should answer to people to make sure that we always keep the conversation going, and not have questions that remain unanswered for more than a day. Right. So yes, today everybody is remote. We actually have engineers spread across the world, so we also have to manage time zone at the moment. But that has been an interesting experience. I had no real experience being remote.
No, and I think, you look for silver linings, right? And this is such a massive paradigm shift. I was in Japan when the COVID things took off, and I was there most of last year. And Japan is, in many cases, one of the slowest moving giant countries, and things are so culturally entrenched. And one of the things that is culturally entrenched is go to the office every day, regardless if you're bringing any value there, and get there exactly at 9 o'clock, take your lunch exactly at 12 o'clock with everybody else. So you have to go to a restaurant and stand in line for 20 minutes just to get in, because everybody in the whole city is taking lunch at the exact same time. Get on the train at 5 o'clock with everybody else. And this whole idea of remote work or work from home, it was like, no, you can't do it. Now, It's changed massively, and companies have, so that's in Japan. But here in the U.S., of course, work from home was already kind of a thing, but now it's spread not just from IT, but for so many different businesses, and it's massively liberating.
Yeah.
I don't have to do the commute. You're in the Bay Area. I've done commutes in the Bay Area, and that's not a lot of fun when you're working. Now you're in Palm Springs, of course, and you're working remotely. But so I think it's great, but there is that, like, the idea of a startup where you cram a bunch of people in a room and you're there for 14 hours a day, and that kind of thing. Is it hard to replicate that energy, that thing remotely?
So it is. I mean, I think when you are head down in front of your computer alone in your room or in your office, that can be sometime you might feel lonely, and at that point,
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to make sure that we keep the team engaged, that we organize the meeting at the right time for them. For example, one thing that we've been experimenting with is every single project you're always pairing with someone. So you might feel like, okay, you're having two people work on one thing when normally it would be one person working on one thing. So maybe you're dividing your productivity by two, but that's actually untrue. We've verified that this is incorrect, because you have always someone you can bounce idea with.
Sure.
You have a camaraderie that happens between this pair of like these two people, and it's a way of replicating a little bit what happens in the office while still being remote. You always have someone you can talk to. You will have peers that you can be with. And I think in the end, like, after we've implemented that, we've seen like more like great projects instead of good projects. So for us, it's been a very positive experience, and we want to maybe roll out to the entire team.
No, that sounds like a great idea, because you have, like you said, you have somebody you can bounce ideas off with. But it's also, for me, that level of accountability, because I've told you, hey, I'm going to get it done by this time, and I want you, because you're going to be more familiar with it than the whole team, but at least you're going to look at it and you'll be like, hey, good work, Mark. That's and then vice versa. So that's a great idea. I noticed on your website there was a coming soon section. And why don't you tell us a little about what's coming soon?
So let me just make sure I know exactly what is on the coming soon, because is it on the type of features that we have in mind?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
But also coming soon could just be in general for your organization, any big announcements, things like that. So go ahead.
Yeah. So in terms of like the coming soon, we're really investing in scaling Airbyte. I think when you build an open source, like, investing in scale too quickly is generally detrimental to your product, because you're investing in a problem that you don't have yet. And now that we have more and more users, I think since we started, we have more than 1,000 companies that have been replicating data with us. So we have seen problems with scale. And these people, what happens is they just remain a test user, and we have conversation with them to understand, like, what are your scaling dimension? How can we scale Airbyte to make it work for your use case? And so right now we're investing in having a stable version of the Kubernetes integration, so that it can start spreading the load across your Kubernetes cluster. Coming soon, we also have more enterprise type of feature, like we're thinking SSO, better internal security of Airbyte. So ensuring that you have permissioning on who can do what, who can have access to the logs, who can create a new source, create a new destination, change the link between sources and destination. So everything that is, so going back to security,
right,
coming soon is a lot more features around security, so that Airbyte is even safer to run in your infrastructure. And yeah, we also have OAuth coming in, so ensuring that when you're writing connectors, you can easily support OAuth within Airbyte. And we also have, so this is a coming soon, is like simplifying the action of creating a new connector. Because why is Airbyte an open source project? Is because with EL you can have general purpose connectors because the business logic is injected later on. So it means that suddenly you have the ability to scale the number of connectors and address the long tail. So our goal is to have like between 200 and 300 connectors by the end of the year. And what we're doing is we are empowering the community to add their own connectors to Airbyte and to the project so that other organizations can get this connector. And now you can crowdsource the maintenance, because what's hard with connectors them is like the maintenance. And so I think that we're going to release very soon is our low code framework to build these connectors so that you have less code and it's more guided. So at that time, I think we will be able to just enable the community even more and add more connectors.
So that's fascinating. Are there any concerns at all about using open source products from a security point of view? Because I mean, it's almost like that paradigm of you have to be in the office. So to get the work done, it almost has to be like we have to control the code, have to have it all in-house, locked up to keep it secure. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's like I'm sure there are areas where you need to completely own the code, but I think open source has demonstrated that it is probably one of the safest way of developing software. I mean, almost like you have Linux, you have Hadoop, you have Spark, sure. And this is part of the data stack of everybody. And it's just that by having more use case, you're exposed and more users, you're exposed to way more issues that can arise. I don't think it's ever possible to write a software that has no bug and no security issue. But what is going to be a problem is if you're the only user, you will never know about it. But if you have like 1,000 people using your product, then yes, someone is going to figure it out. If it's a popular product, someone is going to figure it out because there is an incentive in finding these security issues. Whereas if you're building internally, you're the only one, nobody will know. And one day you're going to suffer from that. So I think open source is the safest way to build software because you're exposed to all of that.
Are you ever surprised, the direction that your product takes? Because you're like part of this community, and at some point it takes a kind of create a life of its own, and you're like, oh, I didn't anticipate that fork over here.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. We were talking with one of our user, and actually it's someone who's going to present their use case to one of our community events, and they came up with a use case that we had not thought about it. And we're an enabler, so we just give a platform and people can build what they want with the platform. And what they did was very interesting. Is I think they have a Redis cache or some cache somewhere and a database on the other side. And what they wanted is to prime the cache regularly, update the cache regularly, like every 5 minutes. And that's what they've used Airbyte not for analytics, not for an operational use case, but they use it for priming a cache and refreshing a cache. And we expect to see more of this like super nice way of using Airbyte because we're just helping you move data from point A to point B. So with that mission, I think you can do pretty much everything you want, and we're looking forward to discover more of this.
That's pretty cool. So, last thoughts, or that you'd like to share with the audience, and also, if anybody wants to get more information about Airbyte, of course they can go to your website. I'll put the URL in the description, but you can share some contact information, etc.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can always reach out to me. Emails michel@airbyte.io. We also we have a Slack, an open Slack. So we work as an open company. So that's where all of our engineers, all of our contractors are actually working. So you can see what's happening, what kind of conversation we're having. And you can
that's trippy, man. Especially, I mean, this is secure talk, right?
It is, but at the same time, we are building not just a project for ourselves, we're building a project for everybody else. And we want to make sure that people are engaged in the conversation. When we have a tech spec, we're going to expose the tech spec because we don't want to be solving something that is not really a problem, or we want to solve it the right way. So it's a way for us to involve our community. So if you want to join the Slack, it's slack.airbyte.io. You're welcome there. And yeah, if you're testing Airbyte, that's also the place where you can ask for help, ask for support, report issues. We also have our GitHub repository where we're very, very active there. But yeah, and we're about to actually publish our company handbook publicly as well. So how do we think about diversity? How do we think about like the organization itself? So just so that you have a way of seeing how we are working internally.
That's awesome. That'll be on your downloadable from your website, I assume?
Yeah, very soon.
Excellent.
We're working on it at the moment.
Okay, and you also have a blog on the website. I'll put like I said, the links in the description. Hey, Michel, it's been great talking with you. I normally would say that I'm envious because you're in Palm Springs and I'm up in Seattle, which tends to be dark. But we're getting into springtime here, and I'm looking out, and it's a beautiful sunny day, which means there's only like 50% of the sky is clouds. But for us, that's good. How is it down in Palm Springs right now?
It's too hot.
Too hot? Oh, no sympathy from me because most of the time I'm jealous. In fact, but anyway, it's been great talking with you. I wish you and the rest of the Airbyte team and the Airbyte community a fantastic 2021 and the best of success.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.